Welcome, y'all. Welcome and ting and ting and ting. You know what I mean? And today we're going to be watching one about the Wild West in America. And it's like a sociological look at the vibe, you know what I mean? The myths and stuff that come out of the Wild West. What we know today as historical facts as to the culture of the Wild West. Let's see if any of those are real or if it was concocted. Let's go ahead and watch that. Seven ridiculous myths about the Wild West here in America.
Embark on a journey through time as we debunk the captivating yet often far-fetched tales that have surrounded the Old West. In this video, we confront 7 ridiculous myths that have woven themselves into the fabric of our perception. Let's unravel the truths behind these enduring misconceptions and discover the genuine stories that defined one of history's most legendary eras. Remember to hit the like button because it helps us a lot. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell to not miss the upcoming interesting videos. 7. Settlers were constantly clashing with Indians. Skirmishes between Native Americans and the typical American pioneers journeying in their covered wagons were relatively rare occurrences. While a substantial number of pioneers, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, made the arduous journey through Nebraska, only a small fraction, roughly a few hundred, lost their lives due to clashes with Native American communities. It's important to emphasize that this figure contrasts starkly with popular misconceptions. The actual number of fatalities attributed to these conflicts was not in the tens of thousands, nor even in the thousands, but rather around 300 to 400. To provide
You know, when I was a kid, I used to love watching those, what we used to call them country and western movies, or western movies like, Clint Eastwood, you know what I mean? And all those guys are out there doing their thing, you know? And then when I started to read the history of the Native Americans, the different tribes and stuff, that's when I started to go away from it. Because I noticed that the tales were told to demonize them. So when they did stuff to them, it was okay. Like for instance, scalping. That they didn't come up with scalping. It's the colonizers that came up with the scalping, but it was attributed to them because it's so barbaric, And these people came here to settle this land and make these barbaric people civilized. So of course they could say that they're the ones that were doing the scalping, right? And this is something I've heard. I've heard several people say that, historians and stuff like that. But isn't it crazy how they make it seem like it's worse than? Of course, people could use the same analogy for the slave trade. Oh, not that many of them died. It's highly exaggerated. The only difference is there's actual historical facts to back that up. Now, now they're saying that the settlers barely came around the natives, and as far as well, not barely came around them, but they had barely had any battles with them, But they that is the whole thing about romanticizing violence. They romanticize it, saying that these people are coming and they have to fight their way and battle through the Wild West and get this done and get that done. But in actuality, they were just going through and fighting Mother Nature and diseases more so than they were the Native Americans. Wow. But man has to control what history is so that they tell those tales. That's crazy, man.
Provide a broader perspective, the total recorded pioneer deaths along the Oregon Trail, accounting for all causes including disease, ranged between 10,000 and 30,000. Thus, the Native American related fatalities constituted a mere 1 to 4% of the overall trail deaths. Intriguingly, it's conceivable that a larger number of settlers met their end in tragic accidents, such as being inadvertently trampled by their own cattle. Conversely, during this same historical period, settlers were responsible for the deaths of over 400 Native Americans. While this reality should not be dismissed, it does underscore that the majority of pioneers did not engage in violent clashes with indigenous tribes.
Wow.
Instead, a more common interaction involved trading with Native Americans or enlisting members of various tribes as guides rather than adversaries. The number of Native American deaths attributed to actions by the U.S. government and military is estimated to be in the millions, a point that remains widely acknowledged. However, casualties resulting from confrontations with wagon trains were relatively infrequent and rare. As for the circling the wagons thing, that ring formation was done each night not to keep hostile Indians out, but to keep their absurdly expensive cattle from wandering off. Interestingly, in moments of crisis, the notion of forming a protective circle with wagons would have been impractical. These wagon trains typically traveled spread out in a line several miles wide. Consequently, assembling and arranging the wagons into a circular formation during an emergency would have required an extensive amount of time, potentially hours, to gather all participants and establish the protective configuration. 6.
Wow.
Cowboys are an American creation. The concept of cowboys didn't originate in the United States, contrary to popular belief. In fact, they emerged over 2 decades before the arrival of Plymouth Rock, making them older than the nation itself. The true pioneers of cowboy culture were Mexican cattle herders called vaqueros, embodying the quintessential image associated with cowboys. Vaqueros came up with all of the cowboy lingo, including bronco, lariat, and even stampede. Engaged in lengthy cattle drives, they rode the rugged trails, and their distinctive sombreros likely served as a precursor to the iconic cowboy hats. They also wore chaps, organizing rodeos and immersing themselves in the lifestyle. Vaqueros lived as cowboys for around 2 centuries, though largely unnoticed by history. When Americans moved westward, it was these vaqueros who knew the land and wildlife enough to help teach the future American cowboys everything they knew. The settlers, however, appropriated and adopted the entire cowboy ethos, even assimilating the term vaqueros as buckaroos. Despite what Hollywood may have you believe, not every cowboy was a white male. Statistics reveal that 1 out of every 3 cowboys were Mexican vaquero. 1 in 4 are believed to be black men who were released from slavery but didn't have the ability to flee far from their captors. Native Americans also partook in the cattle drives alongside their white, Mexican, and black counterparts, forming a truly diverse and inclusive coalition of cowboys. However, the narrative takes a different turn for Chinese individuals who were building railroads in hellish conditions. 5.
So, according to this, they live in some semblance of togetherness. Yeah, these days you hear all kind of talk about cultural appropriation here. You know what I mean? And nothing is an original idea, people, especially things like this. You understand what I'm saying? Thing. I mean, today when I see a Mexican wearing cowboys outfits and thing, I think, man, he's kind of out of place. You know, he should be more indigenous looking. You know what I mean? Well, rather than cowboys. Come to think about it, in actuality, they originated the whole idea of it. Well, you know, to the newcomers, they originated the ideas. Probably before that, there were people that were cowboys before that. Not probably, more than likely. You understand what I'm saying? They learned from somebody, you know. So all those Western movies where you see them, you know, all you're seeing is people of European descent riding horses and thing, you know, to be buckarooing all over the place and all of that. Now think about it. How did the settlers look at other settlers who adopted their culture at the time? Do they look at them like they look at white kids who are adopting the hip hop culture now? Was there pushback by the Mexicans when they started to, you know what I'm saying? That's kind of an interesting thing to look at there. You know, because when you look at today's society, how when one person kind of okay, like in the islands, well, it's not on the islands more so. We don't really care. You know, you see white Rastafarians, Asian Rastafarians, you know, African Rastafarians. Rastafarians is all race and culture. You understand what I'm saying? And but as far as this year is concerned, yo, man, that is crazy. They don't appropriated the vibe, you know what I mean? And Hollywood just like spread it out there, like it's their thing, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying attributed. I'll give you a perfect simple comparison. Back in the 70s, man, everybody was wearing bell bottoms and stuff, you know what I mean? And you see mainly black people, and that's another thing I do believe was taken from the Mexicans too. So, one group appropriate from the other and the other appropriated so from the other. Now, in the 90s, bell bottoms came back, but they changed the name. They call it flare jeans. I remember having a conversation with young women back then, and they talk about the flare jeans. I said, that's bell bottoms. Come on now. And they said, well, no bell bottoms. I said, let me whip up a picture for you from the 1970s, and you tell me if it's not the same thing. You understand what I'm saying? So you see, we recycling stuff, and then we're trying to make it our own when it comes from somewhere else. Somebody else's culture created it. When somebody come up with an idea, what we should do is to start researching to see where it actually came from. That would be a good idea, you know what I mean? Just in case, just for curiosity's sake. You understand?
Bank robbing outlaws ruled Old West. The Dalton Gang and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid all were famous for their daring robberies. They could take entire fortunes from banks that had slightly less security than a modern hot dog stand. Surprisingly, historical records only yield evidence of approximately 8 true bank heists, and that's across 15 states in 40 years. This figure pales in comparison to the astonishing 5,600 bank robberies documented in the year 2010 alone. Even for those unfamiliar with Western cinema, such a statistic would raise eyebrows. But there are several things to consider. Firstly, the towns of yore were characterized by their diminutive size, often grouping essential establishments such as the sheriff's office, saloon, general store, and bank together for sheer convenience. This enclave of essential services typically constituted the heart of the settlement. Being that the sheriff's office was usually no more than a few doors down, you were probably pulling your big heist within earshot of the law. Second, the banks actually weren't that easy to get in and out of. Old West buildings were usually built pretty close together, resulting in banks being flanked by neighboring edifices. Moreover, reinforced rear walls acted as formidable barriers against any unauthorized incursions. When a bandit would exit the bank's front doors laden with ill-gotten gains, a run-in with the sheriff awaited just outside. The most celebrated instances of bank robbery, exemplified by the exploits of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, were actually true. Their feats, however, stood out for a compelling reason. They engaged in acts of daring that others simply lacked the temerity to undertake. In contrast, for the average criminal, a more common target lay in trains and stagecoaches. These modes of transportation offered greater isolation, ease of access, and easier to escape. Consequently, the appeal of robbing banks waned, as such endeavors often amounted to perilous suicide missions when weighed against the alternatives. 4.
See? They romanticize the violence, you know what I mean? And you're going to hear me say that again and again, probably through this video here. And that's what it is. You know what I mean? It would be more expensive for Hollywood to do train scenes than to just put up some wooden buildings and have guys go in there and rob the bank, you know. And so, it was a money thing. My opinion. It was a money thing to just have them rob banks and stuff like that. Speaking of that, just down the street here, about 2 blocks, there's an old building down there that they said it used to be a bank, and that Jesse James, one of the biggest outlaws of all times, actually was purported to rob a bank down the street from here. There's a plaque there. I want to record it and show you guys. And actually that spot's also got like old trains and stuff there, like some old cabooses and stuff. That used to be a restaurant. I'm not so sure if it's still a restaurant, but I think it might be still used as a restaurant during the summer. But I'm gonna record it and show you guys. And this is really interesting because you see all these movies about all these outlaws and gun slinging and blah 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 and thing. And now everybody want to walk around thinking it's the Wild West with gun in the holster. Well, back in the day they used to do it. Let's keep going here. This is quite interesting.
Playing cards was just a pastime. Undoubtedly, the act of playing cards often takes on life and death significance in many Western films. Yet, within the reality of the Old West, not every Tom, Dick, or Harry would have been involved in big-time card games, because gambling card games were an even bigger deal than they were portrayed as being. Remarkably, they are considered a serious profession, with the best players being initiated as professional sportsmen. Numerous establishments within the Old West, such as gambling halls, brothels, and saloons, were exclusively dedicated to orchestrating competitive card games and professional contests. This starkly contrasts with the casual impromptu matches between experienced players and novices, as often depicted. 3. Cowboys wore cowboy hats. Lots of people wore hats back then, that part's true, albeit not the typical cowboy hats we envision today. For instance, Billy the Kid sported an unusual top hat, while Wild Bill Hickok donned a woman's flat pancake hat. However, the prevailing headgear of the time was the bowler hat. Its popularity stemmed from its versatility in diverse social contexts, a crucial factor when hats were a constant male accessory. In fact, a renowned historian of the West even dubbed it the hat that won the West. Examining portraits from that era, it becomes evident that nearly all prominent figures in the West possessed a bowler hat, at least those with refined tastes. Even Stetson's cowboy hats of the late 1800s differed markedly from the modern conception of cowboy hats. Originally named the Boss of the Plains, it looked more like modern Amish hats, and may have been just a modified sombrero. The elaborate curls and embellishments emerged later, but this hat serves as the precursor to every modern cowboy hat worldwide. Such a notion contrasts starkly from our conventional perception of cowboy hats, doesn't it? 2.
So all these people walking around with they call it the 10-gallon hat and the cowboy boots and the big old belts and stuff. They're thinking they're being historically correct. And trust me, I see them every day, boy. You know what I mean? The 10-gallon hat and the big truck, you know what I mean? And that's my heritage. Please. I guess it is in the short term, but back when they were doing their vibe, no. Wow, this is kind of eye-opening to a certain degree. I mean, come on, I knew it would be something sort of like this. Everything that we think was really wasn't. It was just what was picked up and put in film or in stories and stuff and romanticized. There I go, say it again. That's what we're going to think it was back in the day. That's crazy.
Prostitutes lived in poverty. Though the existence of a prostitute in the Old West posed challenges and did not always align with the traditional notions of honor, it did offer substantial pay, unique liberties, and comfortable living arrangements. Brothel proprietors, often referred to as madams, stood out as women of remarkable freedom, education, and wealthiest women of that era. Moreover, they extended diligent care to their female employees, occasionally even enlisting law enforcement personnel for their protection. 1. Guns were rampant in the Old West. Irrespective of public perceptions, gun control regulations of the 19th and early 20th centuries might have been more stringent than today, particularly in the western regions. In the initial stages, gun violence did exist due to a lack of standardized laws and effective enforcement mechanisms. However, the Wild West didn't stay wild forever. As communities formed and settlements expanded, the necessity for and acceptance of handguns began to wane. Around 1878, a quarter century into the westward expansion, measures were finally implemented. Even places as raucous as Dodge City displayed signs akin to this. The notorious gunfight at the OK Corral erupted from a gang's refusal to adhere to Tombstone's anti-firearm ordinance. But it's not like the six-shooter of the time was very dangerous anyway. They utilized a rudimentary cap and ball system, propelling a marble-like projectile with black powder, effective at a range of roughly 50 feet. The Adams revolver, emblematic of the time, could scorch your hand while firing, so you had to be really sure you wanted to shoot that dude. Consequently, the six-shooter wasn't a favored choice even among gun users, serving more as a last resort weapon. Preferred options included shotguns and rifles, having both the power and the range to put down a big bear or a card-cheating son of a bitch. However, envisioning a Western scenario where cowboys engage in high noon showdowns with sizable shotguns hardly captivates an audience. Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and
They even had gun control during the Wild Wild West. Go figure. And there's a reason why they had gun control, because people are idiots. And to think there were people coming into the towns and still, I want to keep my guns, even back then. Starting riots and things to keep their guns. History repeats itself, and usually it's not the good history. Because the bad people speak the loudest as usual. This is it. Oh man, that was quite interesting. Alright, y'all. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. Learn something from it, because I kind of picked up a lot of stuff here as I go along. Now I have stuff for when people talk about gun control and stuff. I say, hey, they control them guns back in the Wild West. You all want to walk around here with a piece in your waist and strutting around and thing, acting like a wild big Bill Hickok or whatever they call the dude. I'm telling you, dude, I'm gonna leave a link to this video in the description and thing, you know what I mean? And if you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. I'll also leave videos on this side, on that side, so you can keep watching what I react to. All right, in the meantime, you all take care of each other. Cool runnings.